Hello, this is Berzinsky for Beardbrand Alliance. My hair, more and more hair in the sink, more and more hair in the sink. Okay, it's beyond mature. I'm starting to lose my hair. You are entering level 3 and 4 on the Norwood scale. Stay tuned. I'm going to talk to you about many options that are available to guys who want to take hair loss into their own hands and fight Mother Nature. So we talked about the mature hairline. If you remember, one finger above that top wrinkle on your forehead is a mature hairline. Everyone, 95% of people over the age of 18 have that hairline. But what happens when your hair starts to go higher than that? And what happens when your hair starts to recede in the temples more than that? And what happens when your buddy tells you, hey, I can see your scalp at the back of your head? Those are progressions beyond what is the level 2 on the Norwood scale of the mature hairline. And you are moving into level 3 and level 4. So that Norwood scale has classifications of number 1, no hair loss, a juvenile hairline, to level 7, which is baldness. And 95% of men are on that scale beyond the juvenile hairline. So most guys are going to lose their hair, and whether it happens in your 20s, 30s, 40s, it really depends on the genetics in your family. So a lot of guys, my last video said, hey, you said just deal with it. I was talking with a mature hairline. Deal with it. There's nothing to be ashamed of. You have a mature hairline. That's great. Most guys would be happy to have a mature hairline. But what happens when your hair starts to recede in these corners, starts going back and more? So a level 3 on the Norwood scale, let me talk about particular people who you might know who have that kind of recession. So we have Jason Thoreau is a good example of an actor who has a level 3, in my estimation, of recession. You can see he has a very predominant temple recession. Someone who might be slightly beyond that would be someone like Tom Hanks. That's more of a level 4. We have Jude Law, very much a solid level 4 on the Norwood scale. And then if you think Bruce Willis back in the 90s, when he first started what appeared to be losing his hair, these are level 3 and 4. So these guys actually have progressive hair loss in that level 3 or 4. And so with level 3 or 4, we're talking about recession in the temples, and then you can also get recession on the crown of your head. So you can start actually seeing baldness, thinness on the top of the crown of your head. And these are very common with a great percentage of men as they move beyond that mature hairline. What do you do about it? Now, it's perfectly good to say, deal with it, because actually these men are dealing with it. Jude Law has been losing his hair for the past 10 years or so. His horseshoe shaped, or the U shape, the W shape, that M shape, as many people refer to it, very predominant, and he has not made any effort with any of the methods that we're going to talk about here to cover it up, to camouflage it, to actually eradicate the problem. So some people do deal with it. So that is actually a viable option. Now, it's hard for most men to see that happening and not to want to do something about it. So some of those things are, and I want to just go through a short list of things that you can do to approach level 3 and level 4 hair loss. And maybe one of these would be a good fit for you. And some of these things are better to do when you actually start losing your hair as opposed to waiting until it's further gone. And that's really one of the first ones on here. And that would be using an over-the-counter topical treatment. Eric has made a couple of videos where he's talked about the use of minoxidil to actually reduce hair loss. Once your hair loss is dormant for about 2 years, so if you start losing your hair in your temples and your recession in other areas, and it goes to the point where you cannot recover some of that hair. So it is better to start some of those things when you are just seeing the first signs of hair loss. So one of the things you can do treating hair loss would be a topical treatment like minoxidil. 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 Another thing you can do, and you've seen these probably coming up on ads on YouTube or on Instagram or on Facebook, laser hair treatments, whether that be in the form of a brush, a comb, or a helmet, a hat. There is some research that's been done that suggests that laser treatments, and mostly in the form of LED light, can actually stimulate hair follicle growth and actually prevent hair loss and actually regrow hair. Now, that has not been, I don't think it's been totally 100% sanctioned by the Federal Drug Administration, but research is being done, and some of the clinical research from these companies suggests that it does work. So those are two things that you can just buy over the counter. But what if you want to go beyond that? Those are things you can just do yourself. What else can you do? You can actually go the prescription level. This would be getting a prescription for a drug like Propecia, which is finasteride, which is a oral drug that you can take that can actually stop the loss of hair. And actually, in 88% of men, it can actually stop hair loss. And in 66% of men who actually take this drug, it can actually regrow the drug. So once again, starting something like this earlier is important. But this has side effects. There are side effects actually with topical treatments. There's side effects with wearing the laser helmet. You got to look like that while you're wearing the laser helmet. But you know, as far as the topical treatments, it's messy. You have to deal with, you know, some people complain about the stickiness of putting the topical treatments on, having to do it a couple of times a day, often in conjunction with a derm brush to actually increase absorption into the scalp. And also there's going to be side effects related to taking a prescription type of drug. And what are those side effects? One of the biggest is potential sexual side effects. So in a percentage of men who actually take it, there can be sexual side effects, decreased libido and decreased performance. And it actually is enough that men will not actually want to do it, who actually start to take it and realize that the side effects were greater to them than actually dealing with the hair loss. Both of these things actually, whether you go topical, whether you go for the laser treatment, or whether you go prescription, are actually going to have a financial drain on your bank account also. So whether that be, you know, anywhere from $10, $20, $30, $40 a month for a prescription, you're going to have to do that over the course of a year and then over the course of a lifetime. So I have a friend of mine who has actually taken Propecia consistently for 22 years. He actually has a fairly good head of hair for a man in his 50s, but he has spent a fair amount of money to actually maintain the amount of hair that he has. So with all these pluses, you may grow hair, you may keep the hair you have, but there are downs also. It's going to cost you, it can be messy, and there can be potentially sexual side effects. So all of those have to be weighed, and you have to do that for yourself. Do the research. We can talk about it here. I'm not recommending that you do any of these. With any of this, you're going to want to talk to your doctor, your health provider, especially in getting a prescription, and also doing more research to make sure that you're as well informed as possible. So what happens if you don't want to do any of these and you see these things and like, okay, that's improving, but it's not happening fast enough. What else can I do? So one of the biggest things that men can do is actually go for a hair transplant. Now, when you say that, you're thinking, oh my goodness, you're going to see these plugs of hair on the top of my head, and it never looks natural, and I don't want to do that also, and it's also expensive. Hair transplant industry has improved light years with the development of a process called FLUE. And so what is that? What is it? FUE. And that's follicular unit extraction. Some people call it FT for short, which is follicular transfer. And what that is, back in the day, people would, surgeons and doctors would take clumps of hair, sometimes as big as 1/8 of an inch or bigger, extracting 5, 10, 15 hairs all at once, taken from the back of your hair or the sides of your hair, and then move it to where you don't have hair. On majority of men, you are not going to lose hair in a zone that goes up to right above your eyebrows. So this down, back of your hair and the sides are permanent. They're going to be on your head. So you think about most people who go bald, you end up, a lot of guys will shave it, but there's always that ring of hair that guys have starting in the front, going around the back, coming around the other side, bald on top, hair on the sides. That hair is permanent. And so with hair transplant, you take that hair and you actually move it to places where there is no longer hair. And so with the flu method, instead of taking 10 to 15 hairs, they are taking individual strands, at most 2 strands. So it's done with the aid of a microscope, removing the hairs in the back and then transplanting them to wherever you want hair. There's a couple of really good videos that you can tune into, and they were done by Mike Thurston. You might recognize this guy. He's a very successful fitness physique model and has great programs, and he has been very transparent about the fact that he's had a transplant. And he's made a couple of videos. You can check out his 6-month update and his 1-year update to see what he did in terms of using the FUE method. And so he was not comfortable with the way his hair was looking. He was clearly moving into level 3, and he did not like the recession on the top of his head or the recession on his temples. He took matters into his own hands and did all the research to find the best doctors with the best results, and he has excellent results. What's the potential of this? There's some downtime related to actually having this surgical procedure. There's also the expense of doing this. I think Mike mentions in his video that he spent about $13,000 US to do the areas on the front related to the recession of his temples, as well as filling in some of the hair on his crown. $13,000. Now, if you have the money, is it well spent? Yes, he looks great. Excellent result, excellent surgeon, totally looks natural. And so do you have that kind of money, or does it bother you enough that you want to do that? Now, he's in a business where he's on camera a lot, and he felt uncomfortable with the way his hair was looking and decided to do that. You get a lot of people who are on camera, whether they be in politics or whether they be in film or theater or models. You see a lot of these men who actually go this route to actually supplement their hairline, to strengthen the hairline, and but knowing that it costs a lot of money to do that. So, but that is an option, and that is actually, I think, one of the best options. Because actually, you're going to do that, and there's going to be some discomfort related to having the procedure, waiting for the hair to grow in. But once you do that, that hair is permanent. So you're taking permanent hair here, moving it into locations where there's no hair or thinning hair, and you have permanent hair there. Is this one time and done? It really depends on what type of male pattern baldness you have. Like in my family, the men never really progress beyond level 3 or 4. So I may develop even a stronger forehead. I'm probably not going to develop any kind of patch on the back, but my forehead might get larger over time. So this could be a viable option for someone like me. But some guys are going to progress through beyond level 4, where you're going to actually see real recessed temples and considerable baldness on the top, on the crown of your head. So if you do a transplant when you are at level 4, you may have to come back and do another transplant as your hair continues to recede. Now, one thing that a lot of guys do, and Mike has mentioned this in his video, is in conjunction with getting a transplant, they are taking the prescription medication. They are also using a topical method. So they want to keep the remaining hair that they have. So they're using the topical and the prescription to keep the remaining hair they have. So if you were going to progress beyond level 3 and 4 and end up at level 5 or 6, you're going to need another transplant. So what this does is it assures that your hair is pretty much going to stay where it is when you start this entire process. So for Mike, as long as he continues with the prescription and with the topical, he should have this hair well into his 50, 60, 70 years old. So there is potential upkeep because you are using all of these things together to maintain that head of hair. What are other things that you can do? There are other surgical methods too. There's actually a process where they actually reduce the scalp. And so it's called actually scalp reduction. So if you have an area of baldness on the top of your head, a surgeon can actually remove a portion of that skin to remove the area that is bald and pull the hair together. So it works particularly well with a crown type of balding. There's also, I've seen procedures, and I don't know how it works typically with scarring, but I've seen people who actually have had the front of their head surgically reduced to actually pull those recessed areas down also. Once again, same problems or same potential problems. It's going to cost you, and there's downtimes in terms of recovery. And you have to also watch, is it going to continue to progress beyond level 3 or 4? There's one additional thing that you can do to actually supplement all of these. And I've seen this done a fair amount in the African American community, and I've seen it done actually a lot in the fitness community. People do micropigmentation. So micropigmentation is actually a form of tattooing. And what you do is you are tattooing your individual hairs so it actually looks like you have a shadow. Like you got a crew cut, it's growing in. Think that you got a fade on the side and it's 1 day in, 2 days in, and you can actually see that you have hair. So what a lot of the guys will do in their temples or on the tops of their crown will actually do some type of micropigmentation. A good friend of mine has some recession at the front of his hairline. He's an African American guy. He is already lining the front of his hair very sharp. And so he went ahead and had micropigmentation on the front of his hairline. And it actually, I don't think most people can tell. I'm pretty good at recognizing some of these things, and I think it looks pretty good. Now I know that guys who have gone the transplant route, as well as those who have used the prescription as well as the topical, also will consider using the micropigmentation. So there are a lot of things that you can do if you are not satisfied with the way that your hair looks when it starts progressively moving up, leaving the building. And so there are options. So I got a little flack the last time for saying, oh, just live with it, just live with it. But then you actually could be someone like Jude Law and then Tom Ford here. Tom Ford is a guy, he's exactly my age, he's in his late 50s. He has a very extreme hairline, clearly level 4, and he lives with it. So I don't want to say that flippantly, but these guys, Jude Law, someone like Tom Ford, look fantastic with their hair the way it is. And it actually becomes a signature look for some people. Bruce Willis, when his hair was going bald initially, it became a signature look for him. So there are things that you can do if you are not comfortable with being at a level 3 or 4 in terms of losing your hair, but you can also just say, this is where I am, this is where my hair is, and it may continue to get worse, and I'm just going to live with it right now. That might be a fit for you. You have to weigh, are you comfortable? Is it really bothering you? And that's something that you really have to think about. Does this bother me? Does this make this, a lot of times, okay, it's not making you less of a man. It's not, it's not doing a lot of things that might be happening in your head. But a lot of guys are not comfortable with where their hair is going when it starts moving beyond level 2. And so it's up to you whether you want to take some of the steps that I've laid out here, whether it be the prescription, whether it be topical, whether it be surgical, whether it be the tattooing. There are options that you have, maybe possibly using all of those in conjunction and addressing your hair loss problem head on. So, are you level 3 or 4? Put your comment below and tell us if that's you and if you're comfortable with where your hairline is, and if you're comfortable telling us if you've done any of the procedures or any of the methods that I've mentioned in this list. Long video, I know, but a lot of information to get through. We'll be back with one more in this series where we talk about the final 5, 6, and 7 on the Norwood scale. And so until then, hope you're doing well. Take care.
Hey, I'm glad you've been watching these Alliance videos. Woo, good job. Hey, do yourself a favor. Treat yourself to a little treat and come join us. Join us at the Alliance. We would love to have you. See you soon.